Hello. All right. So I just wanted to take a little time um, and do a bit of reading. I'm a bit behind this week for what I had been planning on doing, um, mostly because I had a, um, a board meeting on Wednesday, and then I also had got some bad news about my cat's blood work. So I've been working with getting him to eat, and we're getting some more tests tomorrow. But yeah, and the thing is that it's like like the George Zimmerman Hair Club for Men. It's like I'm not only what is I'm not only the president, I'm also a client. So I practice this methodology, which is in which is just getting better at um, at hard stuff. It's getting better at um, really challenging emotions and feelings, and establishing, you know, greater levels of presence and curiosity with them. Knowing what they are by being able to find what the feelings are and work with them. Um, both as to help in the moment, but also afterwards to be able to process and kind of move it out through physical practice and also contemplation. So yeah, I'd really been wanting to write about it, but I have a bunch of other stuff I'm also working on. So anyway, today I'm really happy you're here if you're watching. So it's Sunday morning here, Easter. So I just had wanted to take a little bit of time and make some progress here. And we'll see, it's kind of landing right now, right here in the interruptions and stressors of the first hub. And so, I think that just kind of jumping back in, um, really the central reason for this exploration is about developing a compassionate understanding of the circumstances and events that shaped us, especially in the early years, and created the patterns that kind of inform our sense of reality and our beliefs. And a good way to I think describe it is to say these created reflex patterns in our bodies that are associated with belief systems. So they're really challenging to un like sort of undo the bind of them. And so this work is really in terms of the outcome of it, is it's profound because it's going into things that we actually consider to be reality. And so yeah, it's kind of yeah. But so the reason I bring this up is that going into this subject matter is that for some folks this is it's too much. And if you feel it becoming too much, really, first and foremost, really honor that, and back out. There's a book, so I recommend having, first of all, your sanctuary established about where you can go to comfort yourself. So whether it's going for a walk is a great option if it's possible for you. Music that's comforting, maybe listening to a podcast, talking to a friend, just something that you enjoy eating, something, whatever. um do it, physical movement is great. Anyway, but one thing that's really, that some readers have been doing is that they're reading Pranama Method with a companion book for comfort, something that feels really good. And one book that I want to recommend that just happens to have been turned into a series on Hulu right now is Tiny Beautiful Things. And it's written by Cheryl Strayed. It's incredibly compassionate. Um, Yeah. So just as far as like, with this stuff, when it gets to be, if it becomes like over activating, is to like reach into places of comfort and developing those, and actually using techniques and exercises. But we haven't gotten to those yet. So I guess maybe you can turn, if you have the book, you can turn to those pages. But anyway, so here we are. I'm going to do some reading and then I'm going to go get my breakfast. So, anyway, all right, just take a deep breath in. I'm going to through the nose and out through the mouth. I'm just doing a lot of talking. So, kind of want to clear myself up a little bit and just bring my attention actually now to the soles of my feet and just bring a little presence to my body and the felt sense of the perimeter. So, okay, here we go. So, absence and loss is our topic today. So, Cinderella and Snow White were children of abandonment. Bambi lost his mother to violence at a young age. So did the Lion King Simba, who lost his father. Fairy tales and Disney films are full of themes of childhood neglect, abandonment, and loss. These stories and many others are standard entertainment for children. In the 1970s and 1980s, a free for all style of parenting resulted in a generation of so called latchkey kids whose unsupervised after school hours were spent in a lawless land of siblings and neighborhood children. For the first hub, neglect and abandonment are experienced through the lack of a consistent physical presence of a caregiver, leading to deep internalized feelings of loneliness, isolation, and unworthiness. Any form of abandonment during the formative years often results in first hub overcompensation through clinging to security, routines, and loved ones. Abandonment also creates a tendency to self abandon through leaving things unfinished, being inattentive to bodily care, behaving in ways that we imagine will be pleasing to others, and believing others won't like our true selves if they really knew us. Self abandonment, fear of separation, and even fear of endings and departures all link into first hub interruption of absence and loss. When a separation is prolonged or permanent, such as a divorce or the death of a parent, children experience how essential people can change and or leave for reasons they cannot fully grasp. Their emerging but incomplete cognitive capability, coupled with a lack of context, will create a narrative that puts a child at the center of the story, often blaming themselves for events outside of their control. Adoption can lead to insecurity in this hub because an infant or child is separated from its birth mother long before it can know what happened. This birth mother connection transcends intellectual explanation. Even as adults, it's hard to fully comprehend. For folks with a secure, uninterrupted upbringing, all of this can be hard to fathom, but understand how lived experiences can be different from our own is part of development in the upper hubs. Yeah, that's a big one. I'm going to read that again. For folks with a secure, uninterrupted upbringing, all of this can be hard to fathom, but understanding how lived experiences can be different from our own is part of the development of the upper hubs. And, by the way, I will say I continue to think that, find that folks who have like lack of interruption, especially in the early hubs, are very rare. And yeah, and I was just reading a piece that my friend Mary had shared with me. It was telling the story. It was in the New Yorker, um, with Brene Brown talking about driving through the neighborhood of her childhood with her mother, and her mother. I think it was unclear and actually how it was the paragraph was structured, but it was basically saying like a child could never know that behind all of those walls there were just struggles, addictions, mental illness, and I have to say that as a leader, as a boss, one of the things that surprised me and also alleviated me of a lot of my own sense of, like, shame, I guess, as far as, like, how separate I was as far as having had, like, struggling with things, was seeing that it's pretty universal. And even in what I'd consider to be a middle class to upper middle class, environment, which is like tech, I find it to be, it's pretty universal. It's pretty universal, and these types of, just the challenges of, like, being raised by people, of living life, of being, socially developed, it's universal. So, yeah, yeah. So, to wrap this up, the last of it, sociology professor Carl Pillemer conducted a Cornell University study on family rifts and found that 27% of adult Americans are estranged from a close family member. An article in The Economist about the research quotes Pilliner saying that because people often feel shame, the real figure is likely to be higher. The most commonly severed relationship is between parent and adult child, and in most cases, it's the child who wields the knife. And that was the quote from Dr. Pillemer. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, recently on a personal level, I had a, a recollection about, as a latchkey kid who grew up alone a lot. And I'd gone to a private school that I was driven to, so that when I was driven back home, it was about an hour away. Like, there weren't, for a long time, um, there were not other kids around. So it was just my brother. And so I spent a lot of time, like, alone, like, entertaining myself. And, at ages that now, like, developmental, just anybody would realize is kind of nuts. But the other part of that, and this was the kind of like breakthrough realization, was hearing the car drive into the driveway and becoming really anxious about the state of mind that my mother would be in, and and really how that, like the deeper implications that's created, that still live with me today, um, which I think have to do with my, like me finding familiarity and the comfort of being alone. Like, I still feel very comfortable being by myself, but also there's like I feel like an anxiety, where I'm like, oh wait, like I can feel that surge. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I actually hadn't been very conscious of that, and that came to mind. So I'm going to read one more part here, which is nurture and nourishment. So, physical touch and nurture used to be considered secondary and to primary survival needs for food and shelter. But as anthropologist Ashley Montague learned, his research for touching the human significance of the skin, extreme lack of touch and nurture can be deadly for infants, even when other primary needs are being met. Montague uncovered alarming mortality rates of 90 to 100% of turn of the 20th century Eastern European institutionalized babies who had not been held or touched. Yeah. So I'm going to reread that. I feel like I didn't read that well. So Montague uncovered alarming mortality rates of 90 to 100% for turn of the 20th century Eastern European institutionalized babies who had not been held or touched. This condition, touch starvation or touch deprivation, refers to infants who are fed and housed but waste away and perish without touch and physical contact. Touch and nourishment are fused in the early development of the first hub. As adults, it may be hard to understand why eating evades our conscious control when our relationship with food is affected in this hub. You know, it's kind of an interesting thing. Like, one of the thoughts that just arose in this is that, a lot of shame arises from needs and behaviors that are connected to like, for example, the need to be touched and, like the shame of being needy. So you see people ashamed of neediness or intolerant of neediness in other people. And back to this, like, interruptions and stressors, that these events, when they happen to us, they create these patterns within our bodies. Like, we're not even talking about cognitive. Like, actually, it's the cognitive part, I think, when it's like like the intent to like rationalize the part of the behavior now that's left over that we see long after the event has taken place, and finding that, kind of like uncomfortable, right? So, and having shame and guilt about it. So, even the thing with, like, if there's feelings of like neediness, like I want attention, like there's the thing about being like they want attention, and that's like somehow bad. That's actually like, that's not like that's a negative thing to say about somebody, which is like, why is that bad? Person wants attention. They want to be seen. I mean, what's that? Like, if you kind of unpack it, it's kind of nuts. But okay, so back into the reading, and I'll wrap this up, and we'll be good to go for this. But touch and nourishment are fused in the early development of the first hub. As adults, it may be hard to understand why eating evades our conscious control when our relationship with food is affected at this hub. Food and how we relate to it primarily tells us a lot about which hub has been affected. If we use food as a sedative, we can be reasonably confident that we're in the first hub. Sugar creates a spike in energy and then a crash, which can be great for napping. Eating to support emotional regulation, so-called emotional eating, is the domain of the second hub, and food comforts us. Also, gaining weight can be a subconscious protective emotional boundary that can guard a body from emotional overstimulation. It's worth noting that first hub food sedation usually involves eating while lying down, a return to the comfort of the infant life. Criticizing this behavior creates a painful carousel of guilt, shame, and blame for lack of self control, which leads to the repetition of these comforting, protecting behaviors. And the thing is, yeah, I mean, to the point of like doing something to comfort yourself and then shaming that creates like even more stimulation that needs to be like protected against. So it's like when our go to mechanism for comfort is, like whatever we're shaming ourselves about, we like are gonna creates a increases like us like the force of it. So if we're not conscious about it, this can lead to self-hatred, depression, and despair. But from a developmental perspective, these protections and comforts are profound acts of love and reclamation. Punishing and cruel self-hatred has never led to meaningful or lasting change. But we can transform these food experiences if we self-nurture with the same loving acceptance we'd offer a child in need of comfort. Everybody on earth is a miracle, regardless of age, appearance, or physical condition, and everybody deserves love. There is no exception. Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll say the one exception is like who is supposed to be, expected to be giving the love. So this is something we get into in the fourth hub, which is that everyone is deserving of love, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are the person that needs to be giving it. But hoping somebody will not be loved because they've hurt you is natural, happens to people. But yeah, but that's that's the whole thing. Yeah, I mean, like one of the things, as far as like eating for comfort is it is, while writing Parinama Method, I surprised myself by especially in the end. But it's incredibly intense process. I mean, if you look at the book, it's an intense book, and and I'm a human being, so the like I was pushing myself and like exploring in all of these areas that were really challenging and expanding my own capacity. And at times I was just, for like pretty like decent amounts of time, like going beyond what I think is a probably like what I like probably what I'd advise against. And so I ate a lot, and it felt really like good to eat. And I was eating in a very first hub way where I was trying to, and I effectively comforting myself, And so, part of that is, instead of it being this thing, like one of the things I've noticed a lot in a lot of here I'll say it, like a lot of like self-help books that and even psychological or science-based, when they're written by women, now more so by men, there's a lot about weight, and there's a lot about moralizing eating and weight. And I think it's, certainly, it's probably the stuff I shouldn't say, right? I mean, it's kind of like this is a taboo thing, um, but for me, the thing about it is understanding why and loving that part of myself. Like loving that that is something I needed to do for myself, and making the decision that it was like I was going to be okay with that. And, and I'm not even going to talk about like what it's like, okay, well, on the other side of this, that, the other thing. It really is more about that, is about just realizing it's like if I'm going to do this thing that is going to be really hard in ways that are really difficult to manage, and working like really like what I consider like unreasonable hours and amounts of effort and time, that like it's just what's gonna happen. I'm okay with that, you know? Yeah. So anyhow, if you've been along, made it along this far, thank you. Let's see. Like, please like the video. It really encourages me to see comments. Um, Thank you, Mira. Like, really, there really is an aspect of us having a conversation at this point. So if anybody else wants to get into this conversation, get into the comments. I love seeing notes. It's often people are sending me stuff in direct messages, which anything where you're offering me feedback, or things that were, that hearing about, or just like maybe think about stuff, or even if you have thoughts on whether you think that, I'm wrong, which is totally, it's like, yes, I'd love to hear it. I really look forward to a time in the future where this is more of a conversation, because these really are conversations, and with one-on-one folks, and even in small groups and some of the talks I do, it's nice to like have these conversations and have people kind of say, hey, I have kind of a question about that. That seems a little this, that, like a little doesn't make sense, or I think it's this way or that way. I love it. And I welcome it. So again, thank you so much. And yeah, thank you. I love you so much, and I can't wait for the next one. Talk to you soon. Bye.